My brother, my peeping Tom, haunted my childhood, a perfect blend of trauma and sibling rivalry. "You're crazy, it didn't happen," he'd sneer as I begged for an escape. Now, years later, we're both broken yet bonded. Can a past like ours ever truly heal? It is somewhat of a complicated story, one I am still trying to understand for myself. I repressed and dissociated from many of these experiences as they occurred, and there are complicating factors that make it very challenging for me to hold it against my brother, who I care about deeply. Even so, we are both badly damaged and not really succeeding as adults, and I harbor a lot of resentment about how it has affected me and my ability to lead a semi-normal life. For context, my brother, 25 years old and transgender male, is biologically my cousin. We were born approximately a week and a half apart, with him being the older sibling, and we saw each other very frequently throughout our early childhood. His father was an abusive person, and his mother, my mother's oldest sister and closest sibling, struggled with severe mental illness, exacerbated by her husband's abuse. I know that the abuse he suffered as an infant still impacts him today, things like his father not allowing his mother to pick him up or care for him for hours when he would cry as a baby. Eventually, they got him out of the picture. I think he ended up in prison, but I have never received a clear answer regarding whether it was directly related to the abuse or due to a separate crime. His mother passed away rather suddenly from undiagnosed cancer when we were around 10 or 11 years old. He was the only one with her at the time and had to call emergency services. He stayed with my grandparents for a few weeks afterward, but they were already in their 70s at that point, and despite his incredibly close relationship with our grandfather, they could not care for him full-time. Honestly, it was never questioned that he would come live with us. I believe my aunts will stated that my mother would be the one to care for him if anything happened to her. My mother, despite being the youngest, was clearly the most responsible of her siblings. By then, she had split with my father, remarried, and had my little half-brother, now 17 years old, with my stepfather. My stepfather had his issues, but as a family unit, we were generally getting along. While I had always had a somewhat difficult relationship with my cousin, I was accepting of him coming to live with us. He had experienced something terrible, and as his family, we were going to be there for him. He had always exhibited behavioral issues, could be quite aggressive with his mother, prone to tantrums, would often get into fights with me and our other same-age cousin, etc. But obviously, this traumatic experience intensified them. He went from being an only child with a stay-at-home mother, who was exceedingly doting but not always the most energetic or present due to the medications she needed to stabilize her for caregiving, to being one of three siblings in a busy, chaotic house with both parents working full-time. I am not certain why, but social services was never involved in the transition of his care. Lawyers were involved, but after the legal matters were settled, we did not receive any social support or intervention from the government, and we were not really the type of family to seek that out. I believe my mother attempted to get him into counseling, but he was extremely resistant, which, being a grieving 10-year-old, no one can expect him to make rational choices. And my mother, who was already quite overstretched caring for her first child, her traumatized nephew, an infant, and a man-child husband, kind of dropped the ball on this one. None of her siblings checked in either. They were either also unwell or rather disconnected from any sense of family responsibility. It was a very difficult adjustment for me, to be honest. I think we had a somewhat normal sibling relationship for the most part, fighting like dogs one minute and playing together the next. We lived in a rural area without many options for friends our age, so we would generally set our disagreements aside just to have someone to play video games with or whatever. That said, I do believe it had more strain or a different undertone than more conventional sibling relationships. We were both essentially used to having our own parent on our side when we had disagreements, and my brother no longer had that. Looking back, I believe it left him feeling very isolated, cornered, and unjustly targeted, even when things would go his way. My mother emphasized equity over fairness between us siblings, and while I was accustomed to that arrangement, he was not used to not getting his way all the time. This often resulted in him lashing out at me quite significantly during our conflicts. This would not have been so bad if he had not been about twice my size throughout our childhoods, despite being the same age. Even now, he is a foot taller than I am and probably weighs double what I do, a reality that has always been true. I was very small for my age, so he always had the physical advantage, and we both recognized it. I learned the hard way when to concede to his bullying. The most vivid memory was when I tried to retaliate around the ages of 11 or 13, and he pushed me down on the couch, hit me in the face, and choked me while pinning me. I never came close to losing consciousness, but any attempts to hit him back were futile, and I became very aware of my helplessness in confronting him physically. Things intensified as we grew older. He would persistently pester me in ways that invaded my personal space, poking me, touching me, elbowing me, just generally annoying me. It all appeared to be normal sibling behavior on the surface, and maybe would have been had we been normal siblings, but for me, it was absolute torment. I was already very insecure, being bullied in racist, And while I did not realize it at the time, what would later become very obviously homophobic ways at school, never quite understanding why I was such an outsider. These physical taunts, along with the verbal bullying, calling me fat, stupid, ugly, that sort of thing, drove me into hysterics. And my parents would become so aggravated by my reactions to his subtle taunts that it would often result in both of us being told to stop and apologize rather than holding him accountable for his actions. I was already questioning my gender, feeling extremely insecure and excluded from the normal social developments of children my age. I did not date until adulthood, felt humiliated by the mere idea of having a crush, and was met with disgust when my peers joked about my male friends and I being romantically involved. So being called fat and ugly deeply affected me. It was not just him. As a result of all of this, I began developing an eating disorder and quite severe social anxiety around this time. We started at the same high school, and he made friends much more easily than I did. I ended up forming almost exclusively online friendships while feeling utterly alone in real life, spiraling downward for multiple reasons. This made it incredibly challenging for me to cope when he began invading my space that year. There were incidents prior to that. I cannot go into too much detail, but there was a moment of childhood curiosity, him wanting us to look at each other. There was one incident of touching a few years later, still before we had hit puberty. It made me uncomfortable, but nothing compared to what occurred later. I struggle even to describe what happened when we were teenagers as sexual abuse, though I know that if a friend told me they had experienced the same thing, I would have no hesitation in labeling it as such. To be completely transparent, the original post I wrote was deleted for being too graphic. I have tried to edit it down while maintaining the flow, but it has not worked. I am not upset about it, but I am kind of unsure where the line is drawn, so I will be vague, which may disrupt the flow. I apologize in advance. In short, it involved peeping behavior. He would creep into my room and stand over my bed, take pictures while I was in the bathroom, that sort of thing. This occurred at least a couple of times a week for years, and when I attempted to confront him, he would gaslight me and deny it ever happened, calling me crazy and so on. This only made me respond more hysterically to him during the day when he engaged in his typical bullying. For a teenager already loathing and feeling immensely uncomfortable in their body, you can imagine what kind of torment this was. The only person showing any interest in me that I could recognize was my perverted brother, whom I hated most of the time. As if I could feel any more uncomfortable in my own skin. While I do not feel this way anymore, sometimes I wonder how much of my desire to transition during those years stemmed from a need to escape being attractive to him or any other man. Along with my growing dysphoria, I developed a strong aversion to touch and would not even allow my own mother to hug me. She still does not initiate physical contact, often because of it, not to punish me, but because it made me extremely uncomfortable when I was younger. I ended up feeling so isolated, touch-starved, and miserable, hating and feeling disgusted with myself. When I noticed friends developing crushes on me, instead of feeling hopeful or excited, even when I reciprocated deep down, I was repulsed and distanced myself from them. I struggled to comprehend why I did not disclose anything to anyone at the time. Part of it was how my parents handled our other conflicts, placing blame on both of us regardless of who had instigated it. Even though I had concrete intellectual reasons leading me to believe my mother would support and believe me, I felt as though I might be blamed or told I was overreacting, that it wasn't happening, and I did not want to face that kind of scrutiny when I already felt so crazy and uncertain. Then there was the embarrassment. The whole situation felt incredibly humiliating, happening in the first place. The only person looking at me in that manner was my repulsive brother, which brought a kind of embarrassment to the entire family if we were to address it. I think I knew deep down that if I said anything, my mother would make a big deal of it to protect me. I was also acutely aware of how damaged he was due to his childhood, and it was becoming increasingly clear that neither of us were normal, neurotypical, and I wanted to be able to dismiss it on those grounds. I simply did not want to confront being a victim. I wanted it to stop happening to me more than I wanted to confront it. Eventually, it did end when I moved out for school. I experienced a total mental breakdown and returned home at the end of the year, but by that point I had begun transitioning and my brother had developed a serious obsession with adult content and had long since moved on from me. He moved out for school for a while, I got a job and a car, and started becoming quite independent, and it was fine. I was able to pretend it had never happened. I still did not date, continued to feel completely disgusted with myself, and thought others found me repulsive, as though they could see how damaged and broken I was deep down, but I was getting by. He ended up moving back in after the COVID-19 pandemic. My mother and stepfather separated, which significantly improved things at home. I had my first relationship at age 24, albeit short-lived, and moved out for a year and a half somewhat successfully. That relationship was the first time I disclosed that I had been abused, though not by whom, and that entire situation is another story. I will not get into it here, but it ultimately resulted in splitting the friend group I had since high school. I came out on top, though, with some friends I will keep for the rest of my life, and moved out of my childhood home, becoming roommates with a friend, the first time I have lived independently with any measure of success. I also met a girl online with whom I fell completely in love, leading to another messy, tumultuous relationship that broke me rather badly at the end. I ended up leaving the country to travel for a couple of months once that lease was over and came back home again once I returned to my country, where my brother is also living. While I feel somewhat like a failure about it, it has ultimately been beneficial, I believe. My mother and I have made a lot of progress in our relationship, and I have reconnected significantly with my younger brother after several years of distance. I have also gotten sober after spending the last 5 years in a complete haze from marijuana. And my older brother, whose life has completely derailed in the meantime, is only now accepting that he is quite severely autistic and that things are not going to be handed to him as he thought they would be. He finally sees me as an equal again, and our relationship has improved immensely. It was challenging at first, but we now get along better than we ever have before. He will probably need some kind of support for the foreseeable future. He has never been able to maintain a job, has not worked in the field in which he earned a degree, and cannot really live independently at present. As time passes, I feel more open to being the kind of support he needs, as I sense the resentment I had towards him fading and recognize that in our family, after our grandfather, who is now in his 90s living with us and surprisingly healthy for his age, I am truly the only one he trusts. We have never discussed what happened. He would probably still deny it honestly, but I do not feel like I need that kind of acknowledgement or apology from him. I have confided in a few trusted friends since and have been believed, supported, and have felt much lighter. I do not think I will ever tell my mother. It would absolutely shatter her. Their relationship is already strained, and quite frankly, I do not hold it against him enough to want him to face the kinds of consequences he would endure if I did. He would almost certainly end up homeless, and I doubt he would be able to survive that. I do not really have a solid conclusion here. I am still very messed up. I have numerous intimacy and trust issues and desperately need therapy, which I cannot afford at the moment, but I am still here, which counts for something. I think I just wanted to share the entire story to relieve myself of some of the burden. I have never even attempted to tell it fully before. I am not seeking any advice or anything, but if you have read this far, thank you for taking the time. It makes me feel less insane to articulate it all and have it make sense. Story 2. My best friend Tinker keeps ignoring red flags, ditching our plans for a guy who threatened his ex with suicide. I tried to warn her, but she just says, I just want to see where it goes. Now our friendship is hanging by a thread. What do I do? My friendship may come to an end because of a guy. Trigger warning, suicide threats, possible signs of abuse. I can provide more details if necessary. Oh, and I would prefer this not to be shared. Thank you, I am on mobile, so please excuse any typos. My friend Tinker and I have been best friends for approximately 3 to 4 years. This is going to be lengthy, so please bear with me. Background. She previously dated a guy for 4 years, but he was not a great boyfriend. He barely did the minimum, such as not buying her a birthday gift for her 16th birthday. Nevertheless, she stayed with him because he was occasionally kind. I attempted to encourage her to break up with him towards the end due to his treatment of her. Although she agreed, she never followed through, leading him to break up with her via text message, which I found disrespectful. Once they separated, I advised her to remain single for a while, as it would be beneficial for her mental health. She assured me she would not date anyone for the next 2 years, but we managed only 2 weeks. She developed feelings for another guy, and despite our mutual friend Rose, and I warning her that they should not date since we were all in the same friend group, and he had just ended a previous relationship and might use her as a rebound, she started dating him within a month and they broke up after only 2 weeks. She was extremely heartbroken after this one. I tend to be a problem solver. I am really trying to be more emotional, but I fear I am not very empathetic, so I tried to help them reconcile as it had torn our group apart as we had predicted, but she refused to speak to him at all. Once again, she claimed she would not date after him. About 1 to 2 months later, she developed feelings for another guy but did not pursue a relationship, claiming he had too many female friends. This guy was my favorite of all her crushes because he treated her so well and was very thoughtful. The pattern is evident. Man. Some time ago, I downloaded an app called Wiz out of boredom, and we occasionally reviewed it together, but I stopped using it while she was unable to access it because it was blocked on her phone. She then introduced me to a different app similar to Wiz, which displayed users' points earned through texting others. Rose and I downloaded it, but we deleted it because we found it strange. She did not. By the way, her profile picture featured her body rather than her face, which, while nice, made me feel that guys might comment out of lust. The following day, she told me that she had gone through her requests and found a guy, Jake, from her school who was a member of the basketball team. He had a point score of around 2,000. I advised her to delete it and she complied. Later, she mentioned that she accidentally followed people from her school, including him, which I did not believe as his profile was public. They began communicating on Instagram. She also asked me if he was out of her league, and I assumed she meant that he was beneath her because she has an extremely cute face and an incredible body. I mean it, she has a great figure, an attractive back, and impressive abs. To be blunt, I found that this guy was not very attractive at all. He had a patchy beard and questionable hair. I felt slightly irritated that she seemed to think so little of herself. She showed us one of his texts, which was very cringeworthy and made the rest of us laugh. Tinker then explained how they had been talking at school and chatting during break. I didn't mind initially, but I started to feel wary and uncomfortable with this guy. Keep in mind that I had never met him before, so all my impressions came from her perspective, which I knew she would embellish given her feelings for him. One specific incident was when she injured her foot and could not walk. Her crutches were far from her chair. She was working at a table in a hallway area during sports as she couldn't participate. He approached her, slammed his hands on the table on either side of her and said, "We have a problem." Tinker asked, "What problem?" To which he responded, "You." Tinker is quite short, around 50 to 51, whereas Jake is about 56. I found this encounter somewhat threatening and mentioned that if it were me, I would grab my crutches for defense. I understood he was trying to be flirty, but I felt a shiver run down my spine as she recounted the story. I expressed that it made me uncomfortable. Once more, I reminded her that she had said she wouldn't date anyone and advised her to stick to her word. Otherwise, she might develop a dependency on others and struggle to be alone, which we had witnessed in a former friend. Tinker told me that Jake had broken up with his ex because they wanted different things in their relationship. His ex had mentioned that he attempted to force her to perform oral sex, but she was a virgin and not ready, causing her to have a panic attack. She ended up sleeping with her next boyfriend, and when Jake learned about it, he threatened to kill himself and went missing for 2 days, during which no one could locate him. When he returned, he was in the hospital. When his ex discovered that he was talking to another girl, she attempted the same tactic on him, although it was a bluff. Nevertheless, they warned teachers to be cautious. I told her that the girl was likely lying out of spite toward Jake for what he had done, rather than being serious, more angry than anything else. Tinker admitted that she did not fully believe the girl since she had lied previously, but when she asked Jake about it, he essentially confirmed that the girl was telling the truth. Soon after, Tinker informed me that Jake had asked her out on a date in the city, but because she could not go there alone, they settled for a date on Fortnite instead. I reminded her of her promise, and she told me that she had made it clear to him that the date would only be as friends. In January, Rose and I had planned to go out with her specifically for Valentine's Day, as the three of us rarely hung out due to conflicting schedules. This would mark the first year Tinker would spend Valentine's Day single. I feel like what happened next was predictable. I'm unsure if she forgot due to not mentioning it enough or what, but roughly 2 to 3 days before Valentine's Day, she said, "I know you're not going to like this, but Jake asked me out for Valentine's Day and I said yes, but only as friends. I have the screenshots." I felt deeply hurt by the fact that not only did she go back on her word and ignore everything I had said, but she also ditched us for a guy she had only been in a talking stage with for a few weeks. I left her on read for a day because I was really angry and tend to say hurtful things when I am upset. This is significant because we usually communicated every day. During this time, she texted me to say she had blocked him. I felt uncomfortable with this, as it seemed like her blocking him was an attempt to appease me rather than something she genuinely wanted. I didn't like ignoring her as I counted the hours, but I knew I had to figure out how to respond properly. During this time, I spoke to my friend, the guy she had dated for 2 weeks, and asked him to look into Jake's background since they lived in the same borough, and he knew many people. He informed me that while Jake was friends with one of his exes, he managed to get her to reveal some troubling information about Jake. Some of it was so concerning that he did not disclose it to me, and she began crying as she recounted. He, known as a toxic person himself, told me that Jake was far worse than he was. What I learned: Jake has a body count of 10 at the age of 16 to 17. He employs a tactic where he invites girls to go to the city, and during their date, he asks them to perform oral sex in an alleyway. Upon refusal, he becomes aggressive and angry. He broke up with his ex the day after they had sex for the first time, making it her first time as well. He recently had another girl over at his house. He romantically engages with multiple girls simultaneously, which my friend considers cheating. I explained to my friend that she was not heeding my warnings, and he had a more intimate understanding of her. I mentioned that while she believes she is mentally strong, she could easily be swayed. I concluded that if she refused to listen to me, the only option would be to let the situation unfold and be there for her emotionally afterward. However, I did not want to take that route, as I felt this was an instance she might not recover from like she had with her past relationships, and I could not idly watch it happen knowing I could have intervened. I consulted my sister, who shared similar sentiments, advising me to step back and allow it to unfold, asserting that it was detrimental to my mental health to continue hearing about Jake. If she gets involved with him and he is cruel to her, my only inclination would be to injure him and jeopardize his basketball career. But I do not want to end up in jail, at least not over him. I told Tinker that we needed to speak as soon as possible because I wanted to communicate my thoughts over the phone, but I fell asleep, so I ended up texting her instead. I conveyed the information, reiterating that my intuition had been correct and that she could not date him as he was, quite frankly, dangerous and primarily interested in her body. She agreed and did not go out with him, but she never mentioned how she prioritized him over us. I also stated that I would not involve myself with her and Jake, because it was evident she would never heed my warnings, and that if something occurred, not to inform me, as I had warned her repeatedly. Tinker later told me about an incident where he caught her making a joke about control. She said she was planning to do something, and he replied with no. She asserted that she could do whatever she wanted. She mentioned that his smile disappeared and his eyes changed, but he quickly regained composure and changed the subject. However, it was too late as she was already leaving. I interpreted this as a sign that he was potentially dangerous. While she was screen recording a conversation, it turned out that Jake was no longer blocked. Surprise, surprise, who could have predicted that? I had never believed her claims because she had his number and called him, which incurs charges for her, and she only does so in emergencies. They had each other on Snapchat and Instagram, and on Instagram she had never blocked him, indicating she still followed him. I pointed this out, but I do not think she provided any response. Shortly afterward, it was as though she forgot about everything he had done, as she made comments about finding him sexually attractive. In response, I jokingly insulted him by calling him chopped and belittling his looks, which I know I should not have done, but his reprehensible actions made it feel justified in my eyes. She did not appreciate this, but she never told me, so I did not pick up on it. Until one day when I mentioned that I had spoken to another person, the third individual, since she had disapproved of the first guy, who reinforced my point that Jake was not a good guy. I knew she still liked him and would likely pursue a relationship if given the chance. She suddenly started acting cold, responding with one-word answers, prompting me to give up on the conversation until about 2 to 3 days later when she returned with just a simple, "Sorry, bro, I was pissed." That was all, I responded, indicating that her excuse was insufficient because this was not the first time something had upset her. Though I had not caused the upset, she often acted cold toward me as collateral damage. We argued where she claimed I had set a precedent by airing her. I had only done it once for barely a day while she had consistently ignored me. She argued that it did not matter as any form of airing was still airing. I admitted to insulting Jake without considering her feelings, which I recognized I did, but that was because I desperately wanted to prevent her from dating this guy. Furthermore, I pointed out how she had chosen to abandon us for him, how she had claimed she would not date again, and how he clearly exhibited abusive traits, which would likely be the case with her as well. Additionally, I highlighted that when I had aired her, I sought to find out whether I was wrong about this guy and to obtain advice from others. In contrast, she had posted pictures of herself and her friends across every platform while ignoring the situation. She conceded my point. She then stated that I should understand her nature and that she wouldn't believe anything until it happened to her. I do not understand how she doesn't consider herself an atheist. She viewed the ex-girlfriend's claims about Jake's actions as nonsense. Throughout our argument, I responded to each of her texts, articulating my points, while her responses were brief and often unclear, addressing only select aspects of what I had said. I sent numerous texts, even joking about how it wouldn't bother me if she didn't read all of them because I had written so many. She acknowledged that I had sent too many messages and stated she would not read them. Ultimately, our disagreement was not resolved. Since then, the atmosphere has been cold. We barely communicate, do not view each other's stories, and if we do talk, our discussions are brief. I do not mind friendships coming to an end, but I invested more in this one than in others because I had hoped it would last longer, and I do not want it to dissolve over a toxic individual. I am quite prideful, so I am unwilling to break our silence, as doing so would suggest regret for my actions, of which I have none. I am feeling exhausted and lost, and I frequently disregard my own advice because I do not want her to get hurt. Anyway, I hope you found this interesting. Until next time. Summary: I believe my friend has poor taste in partners, but I cannot allow her to date this particular one as he crosses a boundary and may jeopardize our friendship. Also, red seems to be her favorite color. Story 3. My family demands I forgive my stepbrother, the man who sexually assaulted me, because we're all family. After years of trauma and their silence, I said, I don't want a family with that bastard. Now my grandma wants us to reconcile before it's too late. Can I? Before I, 24 male, explain the situation, I need to provide some background information. I somewhat had a difficult life, growing up in poverty with a single mother, a brother, and a grandmother. She tried to do many things for us, such as working a lot of overtime to afford Christmas. She ensured that we were doing okay whenever she could, and Grandma would support us when she could not. She got married in 2010 to my stepfather, who was the type of person who considered himself the man of the household with a listen to me or else attitude. He was very verbally abusive but never laid a hand on my brother or me because our mother would not tolerate such behavior. He had 3 children of his own, so bringing together a family of 7 was very challenging. I struggled with low self-esteem due to my weight and was bullied for it a lot. My stepfather made me work out for an hour each day, and whenever I made a mistake, he would get angry and yell at me, sometimes for over 2 hours. The 2 older step-siblings and my brother moved out at 18 because of him, so around 2014, it was just me 14 and my stepbrother Craig 17. I am using fake names because I do not know if anyone in my family uses Reddit, and I do not want to consider his real name. We became somewhat close, and one night he wanted to experiment with some things and bribed me so I would feel more comfortable. This is the reason for the content warning. After it happened, my parents became curious about why I had some extra cash, which led to us lying about what occurred because I did not want to get in trouble, and that despicable person wanted to escape accountability. A year later, Craig moved out and I was left to finish high school on my own. I got my first job around the age of 17 and I weighed 175 pounds. Although that may sound reasonable, I am also 6 feet 3 inches tall, so I was very thin except for my stomach, which had a small muffin top due to being overweight for most of my life. I developed anorexia because of my stepfather's harshness regarding my weight, and I looked terrible throughout the entire period I struggled with anorexia. After I graduated, my stepfather gave me an ultimatum: go to college or join the workforce. Being a straight-A student, I felt college was my best option. I received a scholarship that would cover half of the semester for 4 years, and I would pay the remainder along with an esports scholarship. As I was very skilled at Overwatch, I now dislike Blizzard and hero shooters because of the following sentence. To obtain the additional cash I needed, I sought a loan. My mother tried to assist, but her credit was too low, so we approached my stepfather, who had better credit. He declined because he believed I needed to handle this on my own. I asked aunts and uncles for help, but they all refused. Unable to attend college, I ended up working in a factory. It may seem like I am rambling, but all of this relates to the overall situation. I worked with my mother and saved enough money to buy a car, and I moved out once I had sufficient savings. After moving out in 2019, I began dating my first girlfriend. Let us refer to her as Sam. Sam and I were close initially, but when she learned about my past, she became upset about my continued communication with my family. This was when I disclosed my experience of sexual assault, and my mother was devastated. She cried, understanding how afraid I was to come out, and my stepfather was furious with his own child. It genuinely made me happy that they cared. This still affects me when I reflect on it. However, things became rocky with Sam and me, leading to a significant fight. Context: my grandmother nearly passed away due to surgery. When she emerged safely, I remained worried about her. Sam asked me why I was still upset since she was fine, telling me to suck it up. I told her to leave. We broke up a week later. I suffered 5 head injuries working at my mother's factory, leading to my termination, and I bounced from job to job until I secured an IT support position in 2023. Interestingly, I ended up with her former best friend. Let us call her Delilah. Delilah organized our meeting but felt terrible about how she had treated me. We grew closer, and she ended her relationship with her ex due to his emotional unavailability. Delilah and I have now been together for over 5 years. I have further traumatic experiences, but they do not pertain to this narrative, so here is the situation. After informing my mother and stepfather about my sexual assault, I learned from my grandmother that she was also assaulted by her brother when she was young, and my mother experienced the same from her uncle during her childhood. I felt awful and grew closer to my mother and grandmother, as it seemed to be a generational issue within our family. Sadly, this becomes significant later in a disturbing way. In 2022, I planned to attend my family's Christmas gathering, and when I arrived, I saw Craig, my stepbrother, who was also my sexual assailant. I wondered why Craig was there when I thought my family was upset with him. I kept a pocket knife in my hand whenever he approached and privately asked my mother what was going on. She explained that Craig had started a family with someone else and had a child, which led my stepfather to invite him, believing he was trying to improve. She was uncomfortable but accepted my stepfather's decision. I felt sick and left shortly after that. That scoundrel even attempted to speak with me, ignoring what had transpired. Throughout 2023, I began distancing myself from my family and discovered that they had been in communication with Craig about his family and had been offering assistance when needed. I discussed this with my older biological brother, we will call him Josh, and he behaved somewhat indecisively. Then Josh received a text from Craig. I became furious. Why are you communicating with Craig? You know what he did to me, Josh. Josh replied, I am just talking to him because his daughter is selling some bracelets she made and I wanted to help her. I spoke with him when I visited mom and the stepfather and he was there. I sighed and wanted to leave. Josh showed concern, asking, why are you upset? I am just helping his 6-year-old daughter. I responded, it's not about the child, it's about her horrible father, which frustrates me. I left after other comments were exchanged. I sought therapy to address my trauma and family issues, where my therapist suggested that I might need to cut ties with them because of the situation. I did not attend any family gatherings in 2023 or anything leading up to Thanksgiving in 2024. My mother was very worried about me and showed up at my apartment at the beginning of December wanting to talk. I wished Delilah were home, but she was at work. We sat down and I finally expressed my frustrations about my stepfather and my struggles with anorexia. Before you ask, I have been working on it. I have not forced myself to vomit for 4 years. We talked and she inquired whether my absence was solely due to my stepfather, to which I replied no. Then we finally discussed Craig. She asked if I could forgive Craig and I responded that I probably never would. I directly told her that if Craig would be present, I would not attend. My mother said my stepfather had invited Craig and that was when I completely lost it. I broke down in tears saying, why don't you tell him not to invite Craig? You both know what happened, why don't you defend me? She began to cry as well. She wanted me to be there for the family. I cried even harder, stating, I do not want to be part of a family with that bastard. We concluded the conversation, and I informed my mother not to contact me except in emergencies or for matters of death. She understood and left. I spoke with my grandmother about this, and she hopes we reconcile. I felt hurt and destroyed because she and my mother had endured similar experiences. My grandmother and mother have moved on and forgiven those who harmed them. She asked if I was capable of moving on. I was not. My grandmother expressed her desire to see my mother and me mend our relationship before she passes away. My grandmother is 75. Unsure how to proceed, I spent some time with her before leaving. Since then, I have felt depressed and distant due to my family's insistence on moving past these issues. I am too damaged from everything. Delilah understands and fully supports me, wanting me to grow closer to her family, but I do not even know how to feel about family connections anymore. TLDR, I was molested by my stepbrother. Years later, he started a family and now my parents invite him to family gatherings. I no longer attend and my family wants me to move on or forgive him. I had a major confrontation with them and am currently not communicating with them. Edit, I have not been on Reddit today because my sister, I refer to her as that, she has been a close friend since high school, visited. I read everyone's comments and feel very supported and grateful. I plan to be honest with my grandmother the next time I see her, possibly around May since we share a birthday and usually have lunch on that day. I know I will be emotional, but I need to clarify my feelings. Thank you, everyone. Story 4. My strict mom, who never praised me, just yelled, "You'll never love me," after I struggled in college. I thought her beatings were normal and now I crave her love. Is wanting a mother's affection too much to ask? Why does she treat me like a burden? Hello, I just need to express this somewhere that does not make me feel like I am simply a pathetic attention seeker. Thank you for taking the time to read this. If you do, any advice would be greatly appreciated. I did not have that difficult of a childhood. I was the odd child, bullied and beaten up, always under pressure to be an overachiever. I am the oldest, and I never had any friends. This was my life at school. At home, I was punished for my homework, for not being good enough to achieve high grades, and for not obtaining full marks. I always felt like the disappointment. My siblings excelled at everything as we grew up. Sometimes this burden would weigh heavily on me, sometimes I would let it go. Occasionally, as a child, I would fabricate stories and believe them in hopes that someone would pay attention to me or perhaps show me a bit of affection or love. My father was present for a while during my upbringing. When I was 12, he was sent to prison and I did not know where he had gone at the time. My mother always convinced us he was away for work. However, he has not worked since 2013. He used to work as a civil judge or something similar. In 2013, he angered some dangerous individuals and ended up killing one of them while injuring another with a firearm. He has been out of work since then, and his sentence was postponed until the end of 2019. They arrested him and took him away. He spent 4 years there before being released for good behavior. His mother refuses to allow him to work since his release, and per her request, he has not. My mother has been bearing the burden for 13 years. My grandmother, my mother's mother, has been living with us for as long as I can remember. I was beaten so often that my wounds would not heal between beatings. I internalized this deeply. My mother did not hit anyone else as frequently, so there must be something wrong with me. Oh, I have been trying my whole life to fit in at school, within my family, and with my friends, at least those who spent time with me. My mother was quite conservative during my childhood. No phones, no internet, and only occasionally watching television. That was how she was raised. I got my first phone at 13, while my younger sister, who is 6 years younger than I am, received hers at 9. I faced harsh punishments, whereas my mother only punished my sister once in her entire life. I am filled with jealousy and resentment. I just wanted to be embraced and told that I did well. I was just a child. When I turned 13, my mother and I began to argue a lot. I hated her. She gave me no space and confined me to studying. I did not have a phone, but I could occasionally use my laptop for study materials. I would go out with my friends every now and then. Even with restrictions, I could hardly text them or make video calls. I used to argue with my mother, begging her to tell me that I was doing well and that she was proud of me. My mother did not express her pride until I pleaded with her for a long time. For several weeks, when she grew frustrated with my inability to memorize well, she allowed me to sleep in the salon, the greeting area for guests, with fancy chairs and a marble table common in Arab countries of our home. I would catch cold after cold sleeping there with my blankets, and I was not allowed to move. My mother was also strict about my weight. I remember this vividly. Every day I would weigh myself in the morning, and for every 100 grams I gained, I would be punished. I was forbidden from eating certain foods. I would sit at birthday parties watching all the kids eat while I could not have anything because I was considered overweight. When I grew older and looked back at the photos, I realized that I was not overweight. I was of normal weight, not even slightly overweight. Because of my mother's upbringing, I developed anorexia, losing 30 kilograms by starving myself, and she continually praised me for it. She encouraged me not to eat. At that point, I was terrified of food and afraid to swallow anything other than clear water to ensure it had no additional ingredients. When I met my boyfriend, he began helping me overcome this. I was struggling with anorexia, depression, anxiety, and self-harm. He supported me in moving away from each of these issues as much as he could. As I gradually became comfortable with eating again, my mother began commenting on it negatively. I started to induce vomiting after I ate, hoping to rekindle the fear I once had towards food. Following that, my relationship with my boyfriend was often disrupted by my mother. Normal comments she disapproved of, her excessive investment in our relationship, and her efforts to keep us apart, such as not allowing us to hang out, canceling our plans at the last minute, frequently checking my phone, or spying on us, caused stress. She told me she felt jealous because I loved him more than I loved her. I do love him. I am 18 now, and I have been with my boyfriend since I was 14. He is only a year older than me. He is truly the light of my life. If I ever lose him, I will lose my will to live and my identity. He is my rock. He is genuinely my savior. I probably would not be alive if he had not been with me then. He is sincerely the most understanding person I could ask for, and when I do pray, I ask God for nothing more than to take everyone away and leave him for me. He has always been there for me. I held on to him constantly. He somewhat rescued me from my predatory biology teacher. This man would come to my house at 10 p.m. and stay until 4 a.m. teaching and occasionally touching me. He would say despicable things, always talking about his sexual history, complimenting my body. He was a psychoanalysis major, which I discovered too late. He was also very religious and would invite us to pray together right before he touched me. He was a nightmare. He hit me a few times when I said no or showed any sign of disrespect for what he was doing. I sought comfort in my boyfriend, who was more than I could have ever hoped for. He suggested that I might share my experience with my mother, perhaps that would bring us closer together. I told her and she blamed me. I was furious and very hurt. A few weeks later, I was sexually assaulted on the street and I wanted to confide in her about the incident, but she did the same and blamed me again. She said I was weak and that I was asking for it. This shattered me completely. This all took place during high school. We then proceeded to have what I thought was a good relationship. She becomes upset whenever I do not call her frequently, do not update her about various issues that have no relevance to her, or provide information she would not find useful. I have always been like this. That is how I grew up and it is how I have remained. She is quite angry with me right now because of my lack of communication with her. During high school, I wanted to enter medical school. I desperately wanted it. I took the necessary classes and tried, though not my best, and did not gain admission. I was absolutely heartbroken. I was aiming for public universities and did not apply to private ones even though I would have been accepted. I am unsure why I felt compelled in that moment, but my ego would not allow me to apply there. In my area, public universities are far superior to private ones in the medical field. She keeps bringing this up. I am now a first-year student in business informatics. I do not enjoy it, but it is what I have. Today, we fought about my discipline. She believes I am squandering my grades and university experience by not being disciplined and consistent with my work. She was aggressive and said many hurtful things, such as how she knows I will not love her and that she has accepted it and no longer expects that I love her, nor does she love me. She stated that my actions as a 13-year-old are still relevant. I had told her I hated her and did not want to be around the house if she was there, and that she will continue to pressure me to succeed in school only because she is paying for it. She said I always play the victim due to how things were during high school and all the traumatic experiences that occurred. She is upset that I think that those events are something to play the victim about, and she believes that nothing I went through was worth all the fuss I am making. She literally witnessed me on the brink of death, yet she continues to claim that she has it worse. She insists that I am the most free child she has because I am able to go out, work, and travel more frequently than my siblings, who are not interested in any of these activities. She claims I am her most liberated child and that she treated us all equally, implying that I am just looking for attention. I am so sick and tired of wanting to be loved by my own mother. I am so sorry for being born this way, but I deserve love too. I deserve to be accepted and to feel proud of myself. I deserve to be seen, heard, and considered. I am a human being. I just want my mother to love me the way I needed to be loved as a child. Is that too much to ask? I understand she bears her own burdens, but I am important as well. Why does she extend all this to them and not to me? Why am I so wrong? If you have read this far, thank you for taking the time to read this. I just really needed to release my feelings somewhere.